if the poison apple must appear desirable, why does any consumable meet the criteria? You had mentioned a dart gun or a forced injection also as example.
Well, I think it depends on what kind of disguise that the Masked Minotaur is using. Like Kill Bill, when he shoots her with the dart gun, he's still hiding it. So although the gun's not a desirable, he's still using deception to get her up close before bypassing her ability to fight him. So he knocks her out. The goal of the poison apple is to knock out, disorient, or confuse the heroine so that the Minotaur gets a chance to recapture her. That's really he's not killing her yet, not with the poisoned apple. The poisoned apple is like, all right, negotiations are over. Now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to drag you in, and you're going to listen to me while I forcibly convince you to join my cause. That's why you see the heroine enter an altered state. Usually she's disoriented, even in Aliens, by the way, the face huggers are a perfect poison apple. It's internal, it knocks her unconscious, and it changes the heroine for sure. And who delivers the face huggers in Aliens? The Masked Minotaur, Carter Burke. So poisoned apples have many forms. It doesn't always have to be appealing. The appealing poisoned apple is simply one form of deception that can take. The concealed gun, that's another form of deception. Sneaking into her chamber to release a face hugger, that's deceptive. It's delivered deceptively and intentionally by usually the Masked Minotaur.
I gotcha. That's very interesting. Okay, so then I'll say how James has this question here, and then is related to how I would phrase this question.
Sure.
The question is: with many of your examples, you selected characters from horror and psychological thrillers. Critically, here are several non-protagonists. If the Labyrinth is a structure unto itself, I think maybe better examples of these beats would be taken from protagonist heroines.
Okay,
which I understand what he's saying here, which would
like
bring up in my terminology would be the difference between, I had couched this as story structures. Like here is the story, and some people would say a story arc. But should we be talking about character arc?
Yes. In fact, I think these are the themes that the character follows. In fact, I place great emphasis on focusing on the heroine. I think since we're talking about themes, I did kind of focus on the theme maybe, and maybe I got away a little bit from the heroine. But this whole thing is about the heroine's maturation process. It's different from the hero's journey, but it's all about her going from an immature state to a mature state, from confinement to freedom. And along the way, she ends up rearranging or changing the native culture itself, challenging the native culture, or at least if there's a Minotaur, breaking that spell, ending that Minotaur's tyrannical influence on the native culture. But it is about the heroine. That's why it's the heroine's labyrinth. You're totally right. In fact, as a writer, I place the character first and the world second. Not that that means the world doesn't count, but the character always comes first. And this process shows how the heroine will go from one place to another, archetypally speaking. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's things like atonement that pertains directly to the heroine. Her need for validation or reconciliation with her culture, her native culture, or herself. That's part of her maturation process. But you'll see in the first part, she's very confined. There's not a lot. People are tricking her. She's redirected. By the end, she's had enough. All bets are off, and she makes a stand and risks it all in order to defend what she believes is right about the world. And she either makes it or she doesn't. There's plenty of stories where the heroines don't make it. Thelma and Louise, they drive off the cliff. Anna Karenina, which is literature, she throws herself under a train. Romeo and Juliet, Cleopatra, those are Shakespeare. Like, heroines kill themselves, or they don't always make it out. So it's definitely about the heroine and the arc that they're on. These just are the archetypal events that occur on that arc, like the hero's journey. That's how I see the hero's journey. These are the events that occur, and the end result is a hero's arc at the end, and it's all based on that character.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, we'll take one more question from over here, but to expand on that before we go. So, sure. But I was thinking that, okay, if you've got a rather simple story, you might choose one. Like, okay, I got to do the hero's journey, or I'm going to do the heroine's labyrinth, or I'm going to do whatever. But if you've got a more complicated story where you've got multiple characters that can go through several different arcs,
sure,
then perhaps you do have the opportunity to have, like, when okay, this is the main character, so that's the main arc that we're going through, but we got these multiple side characters are also going through an arc. So maybe they do pick up, I mean, maybe they should pick up elements of other archetypical elements of their story. Like you were talking about Princess Leia. You're talking about the injection. I was immediately thinking about Darth Vader and the probe.
Yeah, that's it.
That even though this story is the hero's journey, this is Luke Skywalker's story, we have one of our side characters, which is Princess Leia. So maybe it makes sense then that her side story involves archetypical elements of the heroine. And the same way with Eowyn in The Lord of the Rings.
Totally. In fact, as a writer, you don't want to think too much about it while you're writing. You really want to focus on the scene and the chapter and all that, and you're trying to get the dialogue right. I mean, you're where the rubber meets the road when you're writing, so it's hard. So these should be background apps in the back, like the benchmarks, the archetypal events that could be happening. And as you move to one, you might realize that, well, the poison apple, I think that's the way I'm going to go with this. So how am I going to do it? How's this going to happen? How's this going to work? How am I going to decorate it? Is it going to be something? You'd be amazed at how much of your imagination takes these ideas and runs with them and makes them their own when you're synthesizing a scene or a character moment. And a lot of stories do pull a little bit from the hero's journey too, and a little bit from the heroine's labyrinth. Aliens is great. She fights two villains. She has to unmask Ash in the first movie and then beat him. She has to unmask Carter Burke in the second one and defeat him. And then she has to kill the alien. And then in the second movie, kill the queen alien. That's the distant dragon. That's a hero's journey villain. The alien, it's foreign. It's away from the native culture. It's dangerous. If it got to Earth, it would annihilate Earth with its biological pattern. So she does a little double duty with the hero's journey and the heroine's labyrinth. Mm-hmm. I think it's understanding the meaning behind the archetypes that helps. It helps me anyway, because it helps me distinguish what the hero or the heroine is dealing with and which archetype fits that the best. So the nature of whatever your story is, it's going to go its own kind of directions, and it's going to kind of accidentally lead into these archetypes. I think these are natural archetypal events that characters face all the time. It gives you a way to flesh them out if you know what that archetypal event is. So that's my theory anyway. It worked for me a lot when I wrote my book. I would really focus on the chapter, and then sometimes later I'd be like, oh, I didn't even notice this is that archetype, and then I could go back and fix it to match the archetype more closely, and almost always that scene improved. It's amazing.